Oh. Chickadee check, chickadee check, chickadee check, 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 check. What? Let's get it. Today we're talking about Al-Aqsa Mosque. More accurately, the Al-Aqsa compound, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif. It has 6 mosques on the site, including the Dome of the Rock, which is that famous gold dome that everyone recognizes, and it is one of the holiest sites in Islam. What I'm seeing is not random. Okay, it's a step by step plan. Restrict access, flood the site with police, empower the extremists, weaken the wake, and eventually normalize the idea that Al-Aqsa as an Islamic sanctuary is negotiable. Make no mistake, Israel will destroy Al-Aqsa. They vowed not to impede on the status quo, but understand that they never say what they mean and mean what they say when they're speaking of agreements. They will destroy that mosque. And I fear it's going to be very soon. Very, very soon. Now, here's the background. For decades, Al-Aqsa has been governed by what's called the status quo arrangement, basically the Islamic Waqf, backed by Jordan, that it administers the site. Muslims pray there, non-Muslims can visit under conditions, but prayer and religious administration are Muslim. That's the arrangement. It's not because, Muslims are being mean. The site is sacred to more than 1 billion Muslims, and the arrangement exists to prevent one of the most combustible religious flashpoints on earth from becoming, a world historical disaster. And yet, since 1967, the status quo has slowly been chipped away. A checkpoint here, a restriction there, a closure, a settler tour, a politician photo op, another temporary rule. This is how occupation works. It doesn't always kick down the door. Sometimes it says, we're just updating the access policy. Far-right religious nationalist Israelis want to replace Muslim control of the site with Jewish worship and temple movement groups. The settler extremists saying, Some temple movement groups openly dream of rebuilding a Jewish temple there. The Temple Institute, for example, it is training and preparing for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. On their website. Al-Aqsa is the same elevated area that Jews call the Temple Mount, traditionally associated with the first and second Jewish temples. That is why temple activists see the current Islamic holy site as standing on what they believe should become the site of a rebuilt Jewish temple. For the far right, Jewish prayer and flags and police control, and eventually a synagogue or temple, are symbols of Israeli and Jewish dominance over the most politically explosive place in the city, maybe on earth. Ben Gvir, good old fucking Ben Gvir, I really hate that guy, has openly pushed for Jewish prayer there. And The Guardian has reported that he has also spoken of raising an Israeli flag and building a synagogue at the compound. Right in the compound. No, absolutely not. There's no security. That is putting a box in charge of the hen house. And one police official reportedly called it implementing sovereignty. There it is. There it is. That's the word. That's the word. Sovereignty. Not safety, not de-escalation, not preservation, sovereignty. Because this was never about, who gets to walk there, it's about who controls the site. And once people who want to change the site are embedded in the force policing the site, you no longer have neutral enforcement. It has been ideologically captured. And if the result is that the Islamic Waqf loses authority, Jordan loses custodianship, Israel appoints officials, and Israeli authorities get a say over Friday's sermons, that's just more Israeli occupation, like as if they don't occupy enough. Once you control the keys, the staff, the police, the sermon, the access, the repairs, the permits, and the narrative, congratulations, you control the site. You don't need to bulldoze something on day one if you can first make everyone accept that you own the building. And I got news for you. They, at this moment, believe they own the building. At least some of them. Ben fucking Gavir thinks he owns the building. Then there's the proposed effort to restrict the adhan, the Muslim call to prayer. The stated concern is noise. Because apparently, the call to prayer is a public health emergency with bombs and raids, police violence, and settlers screaming through the old city are just ambient background music.
إذ صرفنا إليك نفرا.
This is the part that makes me want to bang my head on the desk, because colonialism always does this. It turns the colonized person's existence into a nuisance. Their prayer is too loud. Their flags are too provocative. Their grief is too dramatic. Their resistance is terrorism. Look what happened during Ramadan. The old city was described like a ghost town. Shops closed, streets emptied, people blocked from prayer, worshippers praying outside instead of inside Al-Aqsa. And the justification: war, safety, public order, the classics. But according to reporting, on the other side of the city, restaurants and coffee shops were open, synagogues remained open, crowds were out and about. So the danger apparently had a very specific GPS location. Emptying Al-Aqsa of Palestinians, it sends a message. Your access is conditional. Your prayer is conditional. Your identity here is conditional. And once the state can close a sacred site during Ramadan, the holiest month, and then shrug like, sorry, policy. What can I do? That's how you see what the world would tolerate. What more can they fucking take from them? Anyone's saying, come on. They would never actually destroy Al-Aqsa. Come on. Then we need to have a little conversation about Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. Because we've seen this movie before. In 1994, Baruch Goldstein, a settler extremist, massacred Palestinian Muslims while they were praying during Ramadan. And after that, instead of the mosque being protected for the victims, the site was partitioned. 2/3 of the site reserved for Jewish worshippers, 1/3 left for Muslims. Let me say that again. A Muslim holy site was attacked by Israeli extremists. And the political outcome was that Muslims lost most of the space. That's not just history, that's some bullshit. Some of the same far-right currents that glorify people like Goldstein are now embedded in Israeli politics. Ben Gvir, makes me want to vomit, Israel's national security minister, has a long history with that extremist world. There are Temple Mount groups that want their temple built. Where? At the site of Al-Aqsa. It's not a secret. This is like an open ideological goal for a lot of these movements, a lot of these Israeli extremists. So now, does that mean that they all support destroying Al-Aqsa? I mean, they'll tell you no. Now, does that mean every Jewish person supports it? No, I don't think so. But I do know there are religious Jewish authorities who have opposed provocative actions at the site. But the problem is not all Jews, obviously. The problem is Israel. And the extremist groups that have been given pretty much carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want, especially in the last 2 years. extremist groups with apocalyptic goals, increasingly close to state power or embedded in it already. And when the state starts recruiting people from those circles into the police units at Al-Aqsa, when ministers push restrictions on Muslim worship, when access is shut down, when custodianship is threatened, and when the site is rebranded through the language of equal access, at some point, fringe stops looking fringe, starts looking like policy incubation. Today's extremist fantasy becomes tomorrow's government proposal. And then CNN calls it a controversial plan. Al-Aqsa is not just a building. It is a religious, cultural, national symbol for Palestinians and Muslims around the world. And if Israel changes the status quo, seizes control, partitions the compound, or allows extremist movements to advance towards destroying it, replacing it, that does not stay local. That does not stay an Israel-Palestine issue. It becomes a regional, more likely a global issue, a global religious crisis, which is why even Israeli security officials historically understood that attacking Al-Aqsa could be catastrophic. And now the far right seems to be pushing closer to the matchbox, while everyone else is standing around saying, surely they won't light it. Respectfully, they're already flicking the fucking lighter. So yes, I am convinced there is a plan. You know, it's not a document in the Knesset. It's not titled Operation Bulldoze the Mosque. However, that wouldn't be too crazy for Israel. We've seen some declassified things. And it's like, wow, that was policy. But you know, it doesn't. Sometimes a plan just looks like a policy drift. Sometimes it just looks like temporary closures, police recruitment. Sometimes it just looks like changing who appoints the imams, or restricting the call to prayer. Sometimes it looks like letting extremists become normal political actors. Sometimes destruction does not begin with explosives. Sometimes it begins with administration.